Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. Nestled in the quiet heart of Pinecrest, a small suburban town that seemed enveloped in an eternal autumn glow. The leaves rustled gently in the crisp air, promise of seasonal change. It was known for its idyllic parks, close-knit community, and Sunday church services, where neighbors gathered, exchanging pleasantries and the latest town gossip. Yet, beneath its quaint exterior, Pinecrest held its share, secrets that would soon surface, unraveling the facade of peace and tranquility. On a fateful October morning in 2019, residents were jolted from their morning routines when the news of a missing child shattered the calm. 3-year-old Emily Carter had not been seen since she wandered into her backyard, lured by the pursuit of a colorful butterfly. Her parents, Lisa and Tom, frantically searched the neighborhood, calling her name. But it was as if she had vanished into thin air. The local police were quick to respond, setting up a command center in the town hall, while neighbors converged with flashlights and search dogs, scouring the dense woods that bordered the Carter family's property. With each passing hour, the gravity of the situation deepened. The vibrant autumn leaves now bore witness to a community enveloped in anguish, a stark contrast to the usual laughter of children echoing through the streets. Despite the efforts of volunteers and law enforcement alike, whispers of doubt began to make their way through Pinecrest. What had happened to Emily? Was she lost? Or was something more sinister at play? As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson, the town awaited answers, unaware that the shadows concealing the truth were growing darker with each moment that passed. The victim. Emily Carter was the kind of child who lit up a room with her infectious laughter and warm smile. At 3 years old, she was taught to recite the names of her favorite colors: pink, purple, and a particularly enthusiastic rainbow. She wore mismatched socks as a badge of honor and twirled in her frilly yellow dress, as if each spin transported her to a magical world where butterflies were her friends. Growing up in Pinecrest, her days were filled with innocent adventures, exploring around her family's modest home, creating art with sidewalk chalk, and playing hide and seek with neighborhood friends. Lisa Carter often shared how Emily possessed a unique energy. She was observant, asking questions that belied her years. "Why do leaves fall?" she would ask while gazing up at the big oak tree in their backyard. Tom would respond with laughter. "So the trees can dance in winter, of course." She thrived on their playful banter, skipping happily through the grass, unfazed by the adult worries hovering around her parents. That October morning had started like any other. After a hearty breakfast of blueberry pancakes, dedicated to Emily's favorite, she had darted into the yard, a swirl of yellow in her parents' vision. For a moment, the laughter faded as Lisa called her name, offering a crooked smile at the child's unbridled joy. Yet, when the sun began its slow descent, relief turned to despair. The yard had grown eerily silent, the usual welcoming sounds replaced by a haunting stillness. Emily's absence was not merely the loss of a child. It ignited a nightmare within her family, leaving shadows that would stretch across the small town, a reminder of the fragility of childhood and the monstrous possibility that Innocence could be stolen in an instant. As search teams fanned out across Pinecrest, the realization set in. Emily's disappearance was no longer a simple case of a little girl lost. It was becoming a mystery that would envelop the very identity of the community, shaping the lives of the community, everyone who called Pinecrest home. The crime scene. The sun slipped behind the horizon, its last beams wrestling to illuminate the Carter home as officers from the Pinecrest Police Department began cordoning off the backyard for an extensive investigation. Facial awareness, usually heightened in emergencies, now fell prey to the gnawing ache of despair. What was once a cheerful sanctuary, adorned with a colorful playset and flower beds Lisa had lovingly tended, was now transformed into a zone of intense scrutiny. Detective Sarah Miles, a seasoned investigator with over a decade of experience, arrived at the scene to a chorus of concerned murmurs among the small crowd gathered outside the yellow police tape. Her gaze swept across the yard clean, meticulously kept, but something was amiss. The air buzzed with tension as the officers began their work. The gravity of the situation became palpable. "Any signs of struggle?" she asked her partner, Officer Bennett. "Nothing obvious," he replied, his brow furrowed. "But we're still waiting on the forensics team." Sarah noticed the swing set still swaying gently, as if Emily had just left it moments before. It struck her deeply, a stark reminder of the innocence that had been so abruptly shattered. Memories dissected in her mind of her own daughter playing in a similar yard. Brushing those thoughts aside, she focused on the task at hand. The child's tricycle lay overturned, its bright red paint gleaming under the fading light. A garden gnome, chipped and frazzled, presided over the scene, a silent witness to the day's shocking events. Further inspection led to the flower beds, whose vibrant petals seemed to weep under the weight of uncertainty. Footprints in the soft soil caught her eye. They were too small, almost delicate, leading toward the boundary where the trees thickened into shadow. As the forensic team began to document the Senate-taking photographs, collecting soil samples, marking the site with colored flags, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were soon to unearth a truth that would reverberate far beyond the borders. Pinecrest. The stakes had escalated. The case was no longer about finding Emily. It had morphed into a desperate search for justice in a now fractured community. And as she stood there, each step taken under the gaze of nature's fading light, hope dwindled and a darker narrative began to unfold. The early investigation. With the sun's rise came a renewed sense of urgency, compelling every resident of Pinecrest to grapple with the reality of Emily's disappearance. Detective Sarah Miles convened a briefing at the command center, set up in the town hall, where flashing lights and the buzz of radios painted a frantic picture. The small room was filled with officers, volunteers, and town officials, all bearing the weight of the community's anxiety. "Listen up," Sarah started, her voice steady despite the turmoil surrounding them. "We are dealing with a missing child case, and every second counts. We need to exhaust all leads and leave no stone unturned." A map of Pinecrest adorned the wall, with markers indicating the search areas and the homes of residents. "We'll begin door-to-door canvassing. Families know their routines: who was outside, who saw what. Every clue can lead us to Emily." Officers nodded in agreement as she continued to delegate tasks, a meticulous plan taking shape despite the underlying chaos. With a growing list of interviews, They scoured the neighborhood for any eyewitness accounts. Tom and Lisa Carter were placed in a separate room, their faces pale, encased in grief. Officers moved between homes, asking the same questions, hoping for even the slightest fragment of information to illuminate the path forward. "Did you see anything unusual this morning?" one officer inquired of Mrs. Johnson, an elderly neighbor collecting her mail. She recalled seeing Lisa sipping coffee on the porch while Emily played, but nothing out of the ordinary piqued her interest. As hours blurred, the telltale signs of frustration began to emerge. Faces tightened, and speculative murmurs filled the gaps between interrogation. The subtle tension in the air shifted from concern for Emily's safety to a gnawing anxiety about what lurking truths could unfold with each unanswered call. The haunting question grew louder. What had happened to the little girl? Sarah felt a creeping dread settle within her as she listened to the whispers exchanged in the community. Fear and suspicion were starting to cast a long shadow over Pinecrest, and she knew they needed to reclaim the light. In the side streets and quiet alleyways, small clues were beginning to surface. Sightings of a mysterious figure reported by a few anxious neighbors, half-formed tales of someone lurking by the edge of the woods. With the threads of uncertainty weaving tighter, the fragile fabric of Pinecrest began to fray, raising stakes just as quickly as hope diminished. The dead ends. As the days passed, the initial outpouring of community support began to wane, leaving an unsettling void in Pinecrest. Search parties dwindled, with many local volunteers returning to their daily routines, whispering fragmented conversations that rippled throughout the town about the girl who had vanished without a trace. Detective Sarah Miles, however, remained steadfast in her pursuit, hunched over her desk littered with notes and maps, beleaguered by the mounting pressure to resolve the case. The interviews produced scant leads, often circling around the same sympathetic but ultimately fruitless story. One after another, neighbors shared vague recollections of witnessing the family's typical morning. A child's laughter, a woman's nervous smile, but no one could ascertain the details surrounding Emily's last moment. The mysterious figure spotted by a couple of residents, wrapped in a hoodie and always fleeting, produced only a blind alley. No one could identify him, and no evidence emerged. Frustrated, Sarah revisited the forensics team's findings, poring over the photographs taken from the backyard, examining the soil samples and the footprints that led into the thick wood. Yet, every piece of evidence seemed to dissolve under scrutiny. No prints clarifying a path, no items belonging to Emily found. It became painfully clear that their search was becoming like sifting through a dark fog. Each lead was a dead end shrouded in shadows. At a local coffee shop, Sarah overheard sparse conversations drifting among patrons. "Kids go missing all the time," one man casually said, recalling a separate case from a nearby town. Indifferent to the reality of a family still in anguish, the apathy cut deep, a reflection of how the community was slowly turning its back on a tragedy that had once unified them. Even the Carters, now struggling under the weight of despair, faced questions about their parenting, their dedication as a family. Suspicions whirled in magnetic circles, not only around the absence of their child, but around their lives post-announcement. Sarah was relentless in monitoring social media. She saw rumors flare, with citizens speculating, questioning every move Lisa and Tom made. Days melded into nights, the autumn air growing brisk as hope faded. The only constant was the relentless ache in her chest, knowing that Emily's fate seemed as distant as the vibrant hues of fall leaves. all of it spiraling into quietude, teasing the harsh reality that perhaps justice would not come at all. In those moments of desperation, Sarah vowed to push deeper into the unseen. If there was a darkness lurking within Pinecrest, she would find it, even if it meant confronting the very heart of its community's secret life. A break in the case, just as the biting autumn air began to signal the onset of winter. A flicker of hope ignited within the investigatory walls of Pinecrest. Unexpectedly, a routine follow-up interview with Graham Turner, a local handyman whose work had brought him into contact with many of the town's residents. He seemed amiable enough, with a well-weathered face and hands calloused from years of labor. But there was something in his eyes that remained guarded. Sarah met Graham at a diner on the outskirts of town, the scent of brewing coffee mixing with the stale air. He had been reluctant to speak initially, but had gathered some courage after hearing about Emily's disappearance multiple times over the last few weeks. As the two sat across from each other, Sarah pressed for details, hoping for any thread he could unravel. He said. Got finished at about 10. I noticed a car parked near the edge of the woods. Didn't think much of it at first. People parked there to go hiking. It was unmarked, but something about it stuck with me. Did you see who was inside? She probed, her stomach tightening with urgency. He shook his head. Nope, just saw the tail lights and the silhouette of someone inside. But when I went to take a closer look, the car took off. Sarah leaned in, her interest piqued. What kind of car? What color? Dark blue, something like a sedan or hatchback. Couldn't get a better look. It was gone before I realized it wasn't right, he replied, appearing more animated, as if the weight of a long-submerged realization had finally found its voice. Graham's revelation sparked the flicker firmly into flame. Armed with a fresh lead, Sarah wasted no time. She enlisted the help of Officer Bennett to comb through security footage from nearby businesses that might have captured the car leaving the vicinity around the time Emily went missing. Hours turned into a sprawl of distant anticipation, but for the first time, they had a semblance of direction of vehicle to trace, a possible connection to the shadows lurking in Pinecrest. As they compiled footage from intersections and the edges of the woods, glimpses of a car emerged, its license plate almost legible in the grainy film. The collective whispers of the community shifted, pulled taut in the wake of this newfound thread of hope. With each piece slowly falling into place, and a name emerging potentially linked to the vehicle, Sarah felt the heavy curtains start to lift, revealing possibilities that were both disquieting and essential to the case. But as they edged closer to confronting whatever or whoever had taken Emily, Sarah once again felt the balance of fear tip upon a knife's edge, the stakes rising, and the reflection of her own doubts echoing wider, haunting her. Would the truth emerging from the shadows bring clarity, or would it unleash greater despair? The suspect. The digital graininess of the security footage became increasingly clearer as Sarah and Officer Bennett revisited it late into the night. Shadows from their desk lamps dancing against the walls of the precinct. The eerie quiet of the station contrasted sharply with the intensity brewing within. They had identified the car, a dark blue sedan, and with a bit of luck, they had captured a glimpse of the driver, his face partially obscured, but unmistakably marked by a keen, penetrating gaze. Using the county's databases, they cross-referenced the license plate number and quickly unearthed the registered owner, Stephen Holloway, a longtime Pinecrest resident with a modest history of petty crime, including suspicion of harassment. Holloway had often been viewed as a local oddity, His unkempt appearance and tendency to linger around playgrounds aroused discomfort, prompting murmurs among parents. Yet no substantial evidence had emerged to ground those whispers in legality. But there was more. Through a stroke of serendipity, a check of the logs from the local public library revealed that Holloway had been using the facilities near the time of Emily's disappearance. The receptionist recalled him arriving, often talking to himself, his demeanor unsettling. Sarah felt a growing knot in her stomach. The more they uncovered, the more alarming the situation seemed. The following morning, the team mobilized, fueled by a renewed sense of urgency. They descended on Holloway's house, a small, dilapidated structure with peeling paint and a yard overgrown with weeds. As they approached, apprehension rippled through the air, tinged with a sense of foreboding. Sarah exchanged a glance with Bennett. They were teetering on the edge of something ominous. When they knocked, Holloway's voice echoed from inside, agitated and slurring. "Who is it?" he called, veiled in disarray. "Pinecrest Police." "We need to ask you a few questions," Sarah responded loudly, attempting to mask the apprehensive tremble in her voice. The door creaked open, revealing a disheveled figure, standing in the dim light, the very embodiment of disconnection. His hair was wild, clothing rumpled, but it was his eyes that captivate, a frenzied glint hidden within, falling on them like the distant crackle of thunder before a storm. "What do you want?" he mumbled, gripping the doorframe, his knuckles whitening. As they began their questioning, Sarah noted his erratic body language's weedy palms, darting eyes, a constant fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. He denied any involvement, his alibi scant and implausible. "I was home. Don't you have anything better to do? Your car was seen near the edge of the woods around the time Emily went missing," Sarah interjected, feeling the momentum shift. The air grew heavy, the weight of suspicion clinging to them. Holloway's defensiveness only deepened with each inquiry, creating an intricate web of deception that Sarah felt slowly tightening around. The urgency of the moment hung in the balance. They had stepped into the unnerving terrain where innocence met the sinister possibilities of human nature. With a cordial yet firm demeanor, Sarah requested permission to search the premises for any potential evidence that might tie him to the case. Holloway's reluctance belied the tension in the air. As they began to search the confines of his cluttered life, Sarah couldn't shake the cold chill enveloping her here. In this man stood the potential for the darkness they had feared. And yet she recognized that darkness held its own complexities. The question loomed: could this be the breakthrough they had long sought? Or would it lead them deeper into a void that threatened to swallow them all? The trial. The trial of Stephen Holloway began amid palpable tension in the Pinecrest courtroom, an old brick building that had witnessed myriad cases, yet never one as heavy with the weight of lost innocence. The air crackled with dread and unresolved questions as townsfolk, their faces etched with anxiety, packed the benches, mothers clutching their children, fathers exchanging furtive glances, all searching for solace or answers. The shadows of uncertainty loomed large over the community, as every individual present felt the collective ache of what had been stolen from them. Under a watchful gaze, Sarah took her position as a lead investigator, recounting the sequence of events that led to Holloway's arrest. She outlined how evidence had linked him to the vicinity of Emily's disappearance, drawing the jury into the murky depths of who Holloway was, reflecting not only the facts, but the palpable unease surrounding him. Each piece of evidence laid bare raised the stakes: the abandoned vehicle, the unsettling interviews, his bizarre behavioral weaving a narrative, both haunting and tragic. Holloway sat at the defendant's table, a picture of defiance or despair, perhaps, a mixture of both. His disheveled appearance was a stark contrast to the neatly dressed members of the jury, who shifted nervously as witness after witness took the stand. Some recounting odd interactions with him, others speaking of the effects of Emily's disappearance on their lives. Whispers filled the courtroom as Lisa and Tom Carter struggled to maintain their composure, silent tears reflecting the enormity of their loss. As the prosecution leaned heavily on circumstantial evidence, the defense took aim at the investigative methods employed. They painted Holloway as an unfortunate scapegoat, suggesting incompetence on the part of the police, a suggestion that sent ripples of outrage through the crowd. They made arguments about the lack of hard evidence, questioning Sarah's eyewitness accounts and the shaky nature of what constituted a timeline. With each passing day, the trial drew in the community more deeply, exposing fractured relationships and rekindled tensions among neighbors. Each break in the proceedings echoed through the town. Accusations, fears, and lingering suspicion enveloped Pinecrest as people took sides, reflecting newly formed alliances and divisions along invisible lines. Struggling under the weight of emotions, Sarah remained resolute. She stood firm in her belief in Holloway's involvement, convinced that despite the gaps, they had stumbled upon a harrowing truth obscured by the thicket of fear that had previously cloaked the investigation. The closing arguments loomed, and with each moment that passed, a profound reckoning awaited them all. As the words fell from the prosecutor's lips, a desperate plea for justice for a little girl silenced the court. No evidence is more profound than the pain etched in the hearts of this community. Emily deserves to be remembered, and justice must be served. With the weight of their decisions hanging in the balance, the jury retreated to deliberate, the room vibrating with anticipation. For Pinecrest, the fragile hope that justice would shine a light through the darkness flickered uncertainly, leaving every soul holding their breath, desperate for the tide to turn at last. The aftermath. The courtroom stood still. The air thickened with tension as the jury re-entered, their expressions revealing nothing. Sarah sat amongst the spectators, heart racing, straining to catch every whisper of deliberation that flitted across the tense crowd. Each pair of eyes in the room darted from the jury foreman to the judge. A collective breath held, as though the outcome might shatter the fragile resolve that had bound Pinecrest together through tragedy. As the foreman's voice broke the silence, we, the jury, find the defendant, Stephen Holloway, guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in a wave of emotion, anguish, relief, and disbelief intertwined. Lisa and Tom Carter collapsed into one another, tears of sorrow and relief rolling down their cheeks, while the whispers in the crowd transformed into murmurs of gratitude, mingled with lingering sadness. The rightful verdict offered a sense of justice, but it would never erase the scars left by the loss of their daughter. The community spilled out into the street, the weight of the trial clinging to them like a fog that refused to lift. Hushed conversations filled the air, a mixture of relief for the verdict and sorrow for the price it carried, the specter of lost childhood, of stolen laughter, of the playful, innocent girl who had once filled so many lives with joy. In the days that followed, the town of Pinecrest began to grapple with its new reality. Signs of progress and healing emerged in small gestures. A new banner was hung in the park, celebrating Emily's spirit. Residents organized charity events in her name, some even pledging to keep a close eye on their children, united by a silent vow to safeguard innocence amidst the shadows. But beneath the surface, fractures remained. Neighbors eyed one another with suspicion, and memories of the trial lingered a porous body of collective trauma. Holloway's face, tinged with despair and remorse, became synonymous with fear instead of healing. As the seasons changed from hues of autumn, Sarah returned to her daily routines, but a part of her had irrevocably shifted. The case had granted her clarity in some ways, but left her grappling with haunting questions. How could someone, a neighbor, a fixture of their community, turn into the very thing they had feared? In the line of duty, she had searched relentlessly for a buried truth, but at what cost? In time, memories of Emily emerged from the shadows, blossoming like the spring flowers that would eventually blanket the area. The town held a memorial, small but bright, with children's laughter gradually returning to the parks. Yet, the truth remained etched in their collective psyche. Pinecrest was forever changed, marked by innocence lost, but not forgotten. As families wove together again, the echoes of Emily's laughter persisted, a guiding hymn that whispered gently through the trees, threading throughout the community's heart a reminder that while darkness can settle over a town, light too can find its way through, reclaiming what was once lost. In the aftermath of tragedy, they had learned the profound importance of vigilance, remembrance, and the courageous power of unity, despite the bitter backdrop of grief. Reflection. Seated at her desk, Sarah Miles reflected on the peculiar tapestry that was Pinecrest, town, seemingly peaceful, yet shadowed by the deeper complexities of human nature. The case had indelibly marked her heart and mind, something she recognized would echo long after the verdict. Days had turned into weeks since Holloway's conviction, but the images of Emily's vibrant little girl who had danced through sunlight remained vivid, a reminder of everything at stake. Sarah stared out of her office window, where the sun bathed the street below in a soft golden hue. She thought of the families that had rallied around Emily's story, united in their sorrow and vigilance. Life, as it often does, continued onward. But for those who had felt the tremor of loss, the scars remained. Every resident of Pinecrest now shared an unbreakable bond, formed not only from grief, but from a collective commitment to safeguard their children. Their vigilance had transformed into acts of love-renewed connections among neighbors, school safety initiatives, and awareness campaigns that flourished from their shared pain. In this reflection, Sarah found a measure of solace. Amidst darkness, they had ignited a flame of hope, a beacon for others grappling with similar tragedies. As she tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, she couldn't help but focus on the lessons learned. The fragility of life, the value of community, and the unforeseen consequences of silence pushed her to continue her journey in law enforcement with renewed fervor. The pursuit of justice would never truly end. It was a calling that demanded stamina and resilience. In the recesses of her heart, a quiet promise lingered never to forget Emily Carter. The shadows may linger, but so would the light, and in that balance, hope endured. The streets of Pinecrest would never be entirely the same, but in time, this community would forge ahead. Uzilian, united in honoring the spirit of the little girl who had touched them all,